The morning the river swallowed them, the sky was not blue but a dull, sallow white, the kind of sickly hue that made the birds fall silent and the farmers pause in their plowing. A heavy mist clung to the banks of the Missouri, thicker than usual, refusing to burn off even as the sun climbed higher. The town of Marrowstone, a modest hamlet of just over 200 souls, stirred slowly that Sunday, its wooden cottages and gravel paths still glistening with dew. Church bells should have rung. They didn't. Instead, there was music, soft, distant, haunting, a sound that didn't echo but seemed to hum in the bones. Those who heard it first assumed it was wind. But wind didn't sing in harmony, nor did it carry words. The hymn came low and sure, as if the very soil remembered the tune, and when the villagers emerged from their homes, squinting into the morning haze, they saw them, 38 men and women dressed in plain white linen robes, barefoot, their hair slicked back as if recently baptized. They moved silently in 2 perfect columns, hand in hand, their eyes not wild or frightened, but calm, eerily calm. Some of them were familiar: the blacksmith's son, the widow from Ash Grove, Sister Ruth, the quiet schoolteacher. All members of the Light of the Water, a sect that had taken root just 3 years prior, after the arrival of a preacher named Aldrich. No one had thought much of the group at first. They were polite, reserved, always together, always clean, always singing. They didn't recruit aggressively, didn't interrupt town meetings or insult other faiths. But they held their own gatherings down near the riverbanks, lit their bonfires in strict circles, and taught their children never to speak during prayer, only to hum. Their chapel was more like a pavilion, open to the sky, constructed from driftwood and salvaged stone, built with their own hands. No one knew exactly Children refused to play near the banks. The fish grew bloated, their eyes milky, their bellies blackened with strange marks. On the 7th night, a widow named Isabel Darnley was found standing chest-deep in the river at dawn, humming the same hymn, her eyes rolled back, her lips blue. She had no memory of how she got there. Others followed, night-walkers, dreamers, scribbling symbols into the dirt, whispering of the pull and the calling. Old journals were found in hollow trees, pages filled with obsessive lines. We do not drown, we return, we do not sink, we shift. Father Calhoun, the town's minister, declared a fast and ordered the riverbanks sealed, posting sentries day and night. But it was no use. The water itself seemed to resist their efforts. Fences collapsed, torches extinguished without wind. Then came the fog, thicker, darker, with a coppery scent like blood. It clung to the windows at night, pressed inwards, moaning softly, though no breeze stirred the leaves. The people of Marrowstone began leaving. Entire families packed up and rode out without looking back. Some left Bibles on their doorsteps, open to Exodus. Others simply locked their homes and walked. By the time winter came, only a handful remained, those too stubborn, too poor, or too enthralled to leave. But even then, the hymn returned, soft, submerged, like it came not from above, but below. The river never froze that winter. The ice wouldn't form near the banks. Animals avoided the edges, even in thirst. And always, always the robes remained, folded, unstained, undisturbed by wind or time, 38 in number, 38 in place, as if the river itself remembered them, cradled them. Rumors spread beyond Marrowstone. Travelers began arriving, scholars, mystics, frauds, each hoping to unlock the secret. Some left in terror. A few never left at all. And still the village faded, swallowed not. She joined Aldrich, too, and others followed. They met only at dawn and dusk. They ate only river fish and herbs gathered no more than 10 feet from the shore. They stopped cutting their hair. They stopped using their names. And soon they began writing, each of them scribbling in that same blank book Aldrich had carried back from his unknown years. The book had no title, only a damp leather cover etched with a single symbol, a trident formed of jagged branches, bending downward. Inside, they wrote feverishly, in different hands and inks and even languages, some not recognizable. The writings were erratic at first, visions of water folding into itself, accounts of dreams filled with reversed tides and singing reeds, strange mathematical equations describing impossible spirals, anatomical drawings of creatures with translucent limbs and hollow skulls. Then came the instructions, rituals for thinning the membrane, chants for resonance alignment, bathing procedures timed to lunar shadows, and warnings, cryptic warnings. Do not hum near still water after dark. If you hear your own voice echo back from the river, do not answer. The third mouth must remain closed. The book became their scripture, their code, their voice. They called it the Book of Tides. And still Aldrich never preached. He simply nodded when asked questions. He simply gestured to the river. The villagers watched with unease as the sect, now numbering over 24, grew increasingly insular. They no longer used candles at night, but small bowls of river water in which they placed something phosphorescent, something that glowed blue-green, like the eyes of fish too deep for light. Livestock began to refuse water drawn from the Missouri. Some went mad. Some simply dropped dead. Their corpses, when opened, revealed bloated organs filled with black slime. Children began sleepwalking toward the shore. Eyes. Aldrich's followers recorded everything. Each manifestation, each death, each vision. They treated it like scripture. The river is not water, Aldrich finally said one night to his acolytes. It is memory. She holds what the land cannot bear. We were hers before we were man. He claimed he had been drowned as a child not by accident but by invitation, and that he had seen through the back of the water into what came before humans learned to walk dry earth. He spoke of things with no eyes and too many mouths, of music that grew skin, of a mothering intelligence that remembered every scream, every betrayal, every forgotten birth. Some say Aldrich began to change physically in those final years, that his breath grew cold even in summer, that his pupils grew wide enough to cover the whole iris, that when he spoke near the river, the fish rose to the surface, not dead, not alive, just listening. The Book of Tides became less about visions and more about preparation. The day will come, it said, when we unpeel ourselves, when the dry world folds, when the song sung back becomes a mouth. The writing shifted too. Paragraphs curved like waves. Some pages had to be read in mirrors. One section was inked in dried blood mixed with river sediment and titled Offerings. And then, suddenly, Aldrich was gone. His chair stood empty by the river. His home, once the old grain mill, was abandoned. But inside were hundreds of jars of water, each labeled with names of villagers, including those who had never joined him. In the center of the floor, a massive carving, a river that split in three. One branch leading straight down, marked only with a symbol resembling a gaping jaw. The acolytes did not weep. They did not panic. They sang. For days. They gathered in rows, facing the river, humming in perfect unison. And slowly, they began copying the Book of Tides by hand. 38 copies, to 38 robes sewn. 38 names removed from the town registry. They said nothing. They only prepared. And then, in the spring of 1841, they walked into the river and never returned. The first thing Dr. Eliza Ward noticed wasn't the water. It was the silence around it. Not the peaceful kind. Not the pastoral hush of a quiet riverbank where leaves drift lazily in current, but an unnatural deadening, a blanket pulled over the ears of the earth itself. It was as if the Missouri had swallowed not only the 38 acolytes that vanished in 1841, but every sound, every scream, every whisper that dared to question why. Eliza was a hydrologist by trade, not a folklorist, but when the data began contradicting itself, water tables rising with no source, currents reversing against gravity, micro-ecosystems vanishing in weeks, she couldn't help but accept the research grant that brought her to Marrowstone's forgotten soil. The village had long ago vanished from maps, swallowed by river encroachments and bureaucratic neglect. But beneath the moss-choked remains of rotting foundations and barn posts that jutted from the earth like snapped ribs, she found signs, perfect geometric depressions in the sediment, recurring minerals that shouldn't have existed this far inland, and beneath it all, voices on her sonar. At first, she thought it interference, subsurface echo loops, maybe even prank transmissions. But when she filtered the recordings, when she amplified them and slowed them down, she heard it, a humming deep and resonant, matching no geological frequency but disturbingly close to what human vocal cords might produce in perfect unison. It wasn't natural, and yet it had rhythm, almost musicality, and it came from deep beneath the silt, far deeper than any of her seismic probes could reach without breaching what locals warned her not to disturb. She laughed off the warnings at first saw Saint. The town, what remained of it, was filled with old men who drank from tin flasks and women who closed their blinds at sunset, as if night were not a natural event but a trespass. They called her the Bone Waker, told her she carried the stink of questions, and one woman, hunched and blind in one eye, whispered that she'd drown the same as they did, only slower, because the river don't like machines. But Eliza pressed on. She wasn't a fool. She didn't believe in curses, in ghosts, in hymns that breathed. But she did believe in patterns, and the patterns here were off. The river shifted subtly at night, retreating like a lung exhaling in reverse. Sometimes the mud near her camp would be rippled in the morning, like something massive had brushed beneath it. Her team, 2 grad students and an assistant named Ray, began showing signs of fatigue too quickly. Ray developed insomnia. Melissa began waking up with blood in her ears. Thomas insisted he heard his mother's voice underwater, even though she'd been dead 10 years. Eliza herself began dreaming of things she couldn't explain. Tunnels of bone, libraries made of skin, rivers that flowed not with water but with memories. And always, in the background of those dreams, the same hum. Soft, rhythmic, distant, seductive. She found the first chamber on accident. A sinkhole opened beneath her boots near what had once been a chapel foundation. She fell only a few feet, but what she landed on wasn't mud or rock. It was a carved stone, smooth and still warm, etched with sigils she didn't recognize, though they matched the ones she had seen in scattered notebooks retrieved from the Marrowstone archives. They were from the Book of Tides. She didn't want to say the name aloud, didn't want to give it breath, but it echoed in her thoughts like a chorus submerged. The chamber wasn't large, 10 feet across, circular, with walls covered in those strange downward trident shapes, drawn in black ink that shimmered faintly under light. In the center was a basin. It was empty, but damp, as if it had only recently been aned. She returned with Ray and Thomas the next day, but the chamber was gone. The hole was filled. No trace, just river grass and untouched earth. But Eliza had the photograph. And in that photograph, Thomas pointed out something Eliza had missed. A shape, barely visible in the shadows of the basin. A face, pale, watching, smiling. Eliza stopped sleeping. Her dreams became waking states. She would hear water dripping where none existed. Her reflection in the mirror would move slower than her body. One night, the river rose without rain. Equipment alarms blared. She ran outside to find the water nearly 4 feet higher than it should have been, lapping at the tents. But what chilled her was the sound. Not rushing, not flooding, but singing. Soft, harmonized. Eliza followed it. She didn't mean to. Her feet just moved. To the riverbank. To the old steps leading to what had once been the chapel platform. And there, in the moonlight, she saw them. Not full bodies, not phantoms, but impressions. Human-shaped disturbances in the mist. 38 of them. Standing, motionless, facing the river, some tall, some small, their forms wavering like reflections in oil. She couldn't scream, couldn't move. The song grew louder, not outside her, but inside. It filled her lungs. It blurred the line between breath and sound. She felt something pull. Inside her chest, like a second heart remembering a beat it hadn't felt in centuries. She blacked out. When she woke, she was soaked, lying face down at the water's edge. Ray and Melissa found her, unresponsive, lips blue, heartbeat irregular. She recovered, but things were never the same. Her memories began to fracture. She would find pages in her notebook she hadn't written, filled with diagrams and warnings, some matching passages from the Book of Tides, which she'd only seen in pieces. She began drawing maps in her sleep. Maps of underground rivers no one had charted. She ran simulations. They matched. Perfectly. Her grant funders wanted to know what she'd found. She told them the truth. They pulled her funding. Called it pseudoscience. Claimed she was mentally compromised. Melissa quit. Ray left without a word. But Eliza stayed. She had to. The river wouldn't let her go. One night, with only her and a handheld sonar, she returned to the basin. It was back. Open again. And this time, filled with water. Black, still, but humming with that same impossible tone. She lowered the sonar. The reading spiked off the charts. Then it broke. She stared into the basin, saw her own reflection, and behind it a face. Aldrich's, or what had once been Aldrich. Its eyes were hollow, filled with stars. Its smile was the curve of a sickle. It spoke without speaking. We remember. Eliza staggered back, stumbled, and felt herself fall, not physically, but inward, like a memory being unlocked in reverse. She was in the river, but not herself. She was someone else. Several people. She was Ruth, the school teacher, stepping into the river hand in hand with her brother. She was Marion Quaid, humming even as her lungs filled. She was Aldrich, kneeling in the mud, whispering his final words to something enormous beneath the silt. We are ready. She saw it all, felt it. The transformation wasn't death, it was return. Not loss, but remembering. They weren't taken. They were reshaped. Their bodies given to the current. their minds folded into the river's own. A chorus of memory, a library of pain, a sentient current that absorbed what the land discarded. The acolytes had not vanished. They had become the song. Eliza woke screaming. Her voice was hoarse, her clothes torn. Days had passed. Locals said they found her walking down the main road, barefoot, humming, eyes open but unfocused. She couldn't speak for 2 more days. When she could, she asked only one question. "Does the river still sing?" The answer was yes. And louder. They say she left town. But sometimes hikers find a woman near the whispering banks, staring into the current, while whispering numbers and drawing spirals in the sand. And some nights the river rises again, just enough to soak the edge of the woods. And if you listen closely, not with ears, but with something older, something deeper, you'll hear it. 38 voices, humming, remembering, calling, waiting, because the river never forgets. And the third mouth is opening again,